So what I felt prompted to talk about today was what I call the shame stir, but there's one element on it that I want to drill down on. So if you recall, the shame stir is an acronym that we've talked about before. You probably recognize it. It kind of explains a framework for our problematic sexual behaviors and our sexual integrity issues and a big picture of it. So S is for some kind of situation in life, whatever that is. The T is thoughts and emotions that come along with that situation, especially unwanted or unpleasant thoughts and emotions that are attached to that situation. And then I is the three I's that we talk about quite often, the three I's of shame. So what we describe as three categories of shame. And it helps with any emotion to be able to categorize it and label it and understand it better. It does become easier to tame it, manage it. When it comes to shame, and I finally found, by the way, I found the therapist that I got the three I's from because I've been wanting to give him credit. And his name is Dave Weaver. So I just want to give him credit. He's the first one that shared this, and I think he was really onto something. The three I's, I've changed the name of the third one just to make it more accessible with less baggage. So the three I's are insignificance, incompetence, and imprisonment. So insignificance, am I worthy? Am I lovable? Am I forgivable? Do I have significance? Incompetence, do I have what it takes? The thought is, I'm stupid. I don't have what it takes. I can't make the cut. I'm dumb. I'm inadequate. I'm inefficient. I'm incompetent. I can't do anything right. Insignificance is, I'm a mistake. Incompetence is, and all I do is a mistake. And then there's imprisonment. And this is the shame-based thought that it's hopeless, it's helpless, I have no agency, I can't affect change, I have no votes, I have no voice, I'm powerless, I have no choices here, I'm stuck, I'm in prison. And so a lot of times our behaviors were driven by a shame-based belief system. So it's good to codify that, to categorize that and understand that. And attached to this process is some kind of relational need. And these are legitimate needs. These are needs like the need to feel understood, the need to feel accepted, the need to feel forgiven, the need to feel comfort, the need to feel secure and safe, the need to feel validated, the need to feel loved and cherished, things like that. We're talking about legitimate relational needs. So that's the stir. And then when we went this direction, these are what we call destructive cycles. And this direction are cycles of integrity. So there's a path that we can take when we go through a stir. There's situations, thoughts and emotions tied to that situation. Are the three I's showing up for me? One, if not all three. And what's the relational need that's being exposed and how am I going to meet that need? When we go this path of destruction, we either act in, medicate, or act out. So acting in is intimacy avoidance or IED behaviors. All of those are forms of acting in. I'm going to suppress my needs. I'm going to avoid my needs, and I'm not going to pursue intimacy or connection with my partner, with God, self, or others. So this is acting in. Medicating is numbing. This can be through behaviors or substances. This can be benign behaviors or substances. This is relying upon food or some kind of drink. This is relying upon shopping, social media, playing video games, all sorts of different behaviors that we engage in as a form of medicating instead of addressing our relational need. And then of course, acting out was false intimacy. It was trying to meet a legitimate need in illegitimate ways. And for many of us, acting out involved dopamine, but dopamine gets way too much attention and way too much press. When you finish the acting out cycle, what you experience is a whole range of chemicals from epinephrine to norepinephrine to vasopressin to serotonin, and dopamine, this cocktail of chemicals that creates temporarily this feeling of warmth and love and attachment, but it's artificial because it's not through an intimate relationship with someone else. It's through a selfish compulsive act. In many ways, this chemical becomes part of the addictive cycle. That's why we say sex addiction is not so much about sex. There's a lot more layers to it than that. But all we're doing, in a way, acting out is medicating, in a way, once you look at the chemical aspect of it. But when we go down this path, what it results in is more shame. And so Shame was both the origin of this and now it is the outcome. So we're talking about regenerative shame. The shame is actually getting worse and it's more likely to just trigger another acting out cycle or acting in. When we are abusive or mistreat our partners, when we avoid intimacy, we feel shame for that because they did not deserve that. And that gets refed into this system, and we're more likely to continue to act in or continue to mistreat as a result of the regenerative shame. When we go this direction, this is the path of integrity. This stands for sitting in the pain of an unmet need. But what we try when we go this path is the path of intimacy. Intimacy is the only antidote for the destructive path. It is the only one. It's the only antidote for our shame. Our shame began through an attachment, and it will be healed through an attachment, through a healthy attachment with God, self, or others in that order. So when we have a relational need that we become aware of, we should try to get that need met in the order of intimacy: God, self, others. Others can include your partner, but as we're going to talk about in a moment, especially early in recovery, it should not include your partner. And we're going to talk about that. But where I really want to get a little bit more mileage today on is this element right here. Because if you're like me, you don't know how to do this. I don't know how to sit with my thoughts and emotions. I don't know how to sit in my pain. My tendency throughout most of my life was to escape in some way, whether it's acting in, medicating, or acting out. And now I'm being vulnerable and I'm reaching out to God. I'm looking inwards to myself, and I'm reaching out to brothers, or I'm reaching out to my partner, and I'm still not getting my needs met. What do I do with this? Well, what we want to do is not go down the previous path of destruction, but what we want to do is to sit in that pain. And the word that scripture uses for this is suffering. When it comes to suffering, we don't have a very good theology or personal philosophy when it comes to suffering. We tend to view suffering as something that is bad, negative, horrible, should be avoided at all cost. We should escape from it. We don't want to go through any kind of suffering. We don't want to sit in our pain. And that's our philosophy on it. When actually, when it comes to suffering, I'm going to describe it this way. Suffering is God's character building university, CBU, just another acronym. Suffering is how God changes us. He begins to do surgery on our heart. He develops our character when we sit in the pain. So sometimes God will intentionally leave our needs unmet because that's when he gets our attention. He is most vocal to us in the midst of our pain. He becomes potentially most real to us in the midst of sitting in our pain, in our suffering. God wastes nothing. He leverages suffering to build the fruit of the Spirit in us. This is how he develops patience. This is how he develops perseverance. This is how he develops self-control. That the more we are willing to go through this cycle of integrity, the more serenity we put back into the system rather than shame. The more shame resilient we become. On a neurological level, we are creating new neural pathways that don't involve the seemingly autopilot or cruise control of the path of destruction. We went down this cycle so many times that it's developed a virtual rut, a superhighway neurologically for us, where we could do this almost with little effort. This takes a lot of effort. These are new pathways for us. This is a dirt road that as we travel this over and over, this becomes our new repetition. It does get easier, and God leverages it, and it does become easier to avoid the path of destruction. But suffering is God's laboratory. It's how he does his character building university that he is enrolling us in when he invites us to sit in the pain of unmet needs. So with all of this, what do we do with our needs? What do we do with our partner's needs? So the way I'm going to try to illustrate this, let me use blue here, is a container or a bucket. So let this represent the container for our needs. And this is the container for our partner's needs. And in a very real way, what needs to happen is your relational needs that are represented right here, they're valid. They are equally valid to your partners. But when it comes to betrayal and recovery, hers needs to take precedence. This is not for perpetuity. This is not for forever, but for as long as is needed until trust and security are reestablished for her. It needs to be what I would call a 10% focus on your needs and a 90% focus on her needs. And this is not codependency. This is recovery. It needs to be this way because she is handicapped by her trauma that we inflicted on her, and she's not able to pour into our bucket right now. And in fact, she was pouring into our bucket, and where did it get her? If you think about it. So it's not even fair to expect her to try and meet our needs right now. But we so neglected her needs and we've caused so much damage that part of a living amends is this 10-90 perspective. That my needs matter. I'm not saying you should dismiss them. I'm not saying that they're not equally valid. I'm not saying that you're not worthy of having your needs addressed. What I'm saying is, as a matter of recovery and rebuilding trust and healing her and the coupleship, I think there needs to be this 10-90 perspective here. So when it comes to getting our needs met, we still go to God, self, and others, but that others may not include our partner, is what we're talking about here. Now, here's what often happens in recovery. We are no longer going down this path. So we're trying not to do any IAD, no acting in. We're trying not to medicate with ice cream or social media or whatever. And we're trying not to act out anymore. And so we're not going down that path anymore. What happens is, in a very real way, our relational needs begin to become so real to us because we're not numbing them and we're not escaping them and we're not trying to apply them in an inappropriate way through acting out. We're now feeling them. And so we addicts often are very needy when it comes to recovery because we're tapping into things that we have always suppressed, swallowed, avoided, or acted out with. And now we're not doing any of that. And now we've got training wheels on. We're exercising muscles we've never used, so they're severely atrophied. We're trying new neural pathways by being vulnerable and pursuing intimacy with God, self, and others. And this bucket just feels like something that we have never felt before. And what often happens is we begin recovery and we're working so hard and we're doing so many meetings and we're going to therapy and we're working the 12 steps and we've got a sponsor. Why can't she see all the work I'm doing? I have a legitimate relational need for validation, for recognition, for affirmation, to be seen, to be appreciated. And yes, I can try and get that from the brothers and I can get a little bit of effect from that, a little bit of mileage from that, but just one drop from her would go such a long way. But it's not fair to put that on her and to expect her to pour into us and to meet our legitimate relational need for validation, recognition, affirmation, all those things. What can begin to happen as we enter recovery is we become more attuned to what these needs are and we begin to realize I haven't been meeting or addressing these needs in healthy ways. I want to do that now, but we can begin to subscribe to a false belief, and that is this, that all of my needs should be met. I mean, my bucket should be here. I should not have to have any needs unmet. I am now going through the path of virtue, of integrity, and I should be able to reach out to God, self, and others, and I should have my bucket full. I shouldn't have to go through the experience of having unmet needs. And that is a form of entitlement. That is simply not true. There is not a human alive that can meet all your needs. And God intentionally doesn't meet some of our needs because then we don't have any desperate dependence on him if he were to do that. And so in kind of an entitled way, we can have this expectation that our needs should be met. Our bucket should be 100% because we don't know how to sit in the pain of a bucket that's not even a quarter of the way full. And so sometimes what we need to do is we need to scrutinize this bucket because some of what we're calling needs are actually wants. Like, for example, sex. Sex is not a need. You're not going to die if you don't have sex. Sex is a want. But we can put it into that bucket and we can call it a need. And so another thing that happens in recovery, if you're like me, because of my core woundedness, I have a supersized bucket, or at least that's my perception. And so my needs have been exaggerated. My needs have been supersized. My needs um, are inordinate because of some core wounds I have. So let me just be transparent for a moment and give you an example. So some of my core wounding from age 6 to 16 were a series of experiences that I had with others in my life where I felt rejected. It was through bullying at school. It was through the divorce of my parents. It was through dad leaving. It was through some words that were said by teachers, by peers. There was a series of experiences that left me feeling severely rejected and totally insignificant. And that can supersize this bucket where I have this inordinate, exaggerated need to feel significant and validated because of that wounding. In other words, that wounding has left holes in my bucket. And so seemingly it doesn't matter how much God, self, and others pours into my bucket because of my wounding. It's just going through. It's just going through. And I have this constant perceived need for significance, recognition, validation. And then we begin to put that on our partners. The supersized need because of our core wounding. We want them to plug the holes. We want them to pour. We have this expectation, this unrealistic expectation that now that I'm healthy and I'm in an intimate relationship with you, you should be meeting all of my needs. And my needs are supersized because of the shame, because of the resentment, because of the wounds, whatever. And when I have this supersized need, my level of expectation towards my partner is correlated to the size of my need. So now the level of expectation and the level of pressure I put on her to meet my needs is inordinate and unrealistic. This also means that the way I perceive any effort she makes to meet my need, I minimize it. I say, you're not doing enough. You need to try harder. The effort you're putting in is too small compared to the size of my need. And she may be doing triple backflips. She may be going above and beyond, doing everything she can to serve, to meet your needs, to pour into your bucket. And because of the holes of our wounds, it's just not enough. And because of the supersized perception of our need, there's not a partner on the planet that can meet the level of need that we feel like we have, which means that our level of disappointment will be supersized when she can't and doesn't meet our need. And that is a formula for feeling resentment towards her. Expectations are just resentments waiting to happen. The expectations we have, especially the unrealistic ones that are coming from a place of our wounding, that is just a future resentment. This is a recipe for resentment. And so even now in my relationship, I would say that with Jacqueline and I, it started off at about 1090. If I was to put a number on it, I would say it's probably around 30-70 right now, maybe even 40-60. But I'll tell you this, I never want to get to the point where it ever goes higher than 49-51 in our relationship. 10 years from now, no matter how good we're doing, I never want to get to the point where I feel like my needs supersede hers and the importance of my needs trump the importance of her needs. So what we need to do is we need to mend some of these holes. We need to do some root work. We need to go back to how did the 3 I's begin for us in the first place, but realize that we're not going to be able to mend all of these holes. Some of these holes we're going to have to learn to live with and trust God with, and we're going to have to learn to sit in the pain of unmet needs, that's part of the human experience, and God uses that. So what I'd like to close with is just reframing. Having unmet needs is not necessarily a negative thing, that suffering can actually be a positive growth experience for us. And this 10-90 ratio that I recommend, I want to reframe that because that can seem unfair. That can lead to resentment. That can take us into some dangerous perspectives if we're not careful. So when we focus on meeting our partner's needs and we have this 90-10 perspective, there's a couple of benefits that can come from it. First of all, it is a great path to slowly rebuild trust with her by meeting her needs in practical ways and by putting her needs above ours. Second, it can really be used by God to teach us humility, that is less of a focus on ourselves and our own needs and more of a focus on her and serving her and putting her first and meeting her needs. Another benefit to this is it can teach us true agape love, the kind of love that God has for us. Sacrificial, one way, unconditional, no strings attached. It's not, I scratch your back, so you scratch mine. It's me meeting your needs without any conditions, without any strings. It's one way. It's agape love. It's selfless, sacrificial love. And then finally, for a lot of us, it can help with a sense of agency. And what I mean by that is a lot of times, especially in early recovery, we feel like there's no way that I can fix this. She is too damaged. And in fact, everything that I do, I feel like it makes it worse. And so I'm powerless here. Like it makes us want to turn towards resignation and just giving up and hopelessness and despair. But the fact is, meeting her needs is a very practical thing that you can do. That yes, we feel powerless and we feel like we're just making it worse, but here's something you can control. Put her needs first. And that can be in very practical ways, but you can trust that God is using your new focus on a living amends to help slowly over time rebuild trust, develop humility in you, teach you what true love really means, because we don't know and we didn't express it to our partners. And we can have a little bit of hope that as long as she's allowing us to meet some of our needs, she's still invested in the relationship and there's still something I can do. I'm not totally powerless. It's not hopeless. It's not helpless. I can focus on living amends. I can focus on service. So when it comes to God's university for our character development, when it comes to sitting in pain, this is not something that we're accustomed to. This is not something that we did in our active addiction. This is something that we need to become very familiar with. And we need to trust that God is allowing this need to be unmet, and he's leveraging this because he's growing us. He's developing us. We're becoming men of character. He is honoring the fact that we are resisting the temptation to go this way, that we refuse to medicate. Earlier this week, 2 days ago, I sat in the pain of an unmet need. I tried to get it met through intimacy, and it was clear that this is just going to be one of those things that I need to sit in and I need to experience. And what I felt tempted in that moment was to turn to sugar and ice cream and sweets to just kind of eat my emotions, to just kind of numb and medicate. And that has been something that I've realized I turn to quite often, and it's emotional eating because I don't know how to sit in the pain. So let me at least numb it a little bit. And I was actually on my way to the store to get some ice cream. And I turned around and I came home and I told Jacqueline, I need to just sit in this. I don't need to medicate. I need to just learn. I need to trust that God's doing something in me. I don't need to try and escape. And that's going to be a common occurrence for us. And I know you guys have been through this, and I know you can speak to this. When have you had to sit in the pain? What was it like for you? What has God done? How has he changed you as a result? Or are there still some ways that you're following this destructive path? And how do you get back over here? Do this first. God, self, and others, pursue intimacy. Some of our bucket will be filled by doing that. And that's the benefit of intimacy. We're meeting relational, legitimate needs in legitimate ways, but the bucket's never going to be full. And there's always going to be a few holes in it. And how do we learn to sit in? Our addiction was escaping from an unpleasant present emotion or reality. Doing the opposite is sitting in it. And God uses that.